evening to our credit union family. Good evening to our esteemed panel. I am Natasha Grant, the chair of the Education Committee of the U.W.I Credit Union, and it is with great pleasure that I am here this evening to have a conversation with you, our members, to speak about our national budget. As we are all aware, the budget impacts on us in some form or fashion, and as a financial institution, as much as we are impacted, we know and understand how much you as a member can be impacted also. And that is the reason for us hosting this particular session every year. We know the importance, and it is about informing you, our members, and keeping you all in the know as to what is happening within Trinidad and Tobago and the national economy. And this evening, we have none other than Dr. Marlene Attzs as our moderator. Dr. Attzs has been with us from the inception of this program. She saw our vision, and she has helped us live out this vision every year for the last 5 years. So I'm here now to introduce to you Dr. Attzs, the official introduction of Dr. Attzs. Dr. Marlene Attzs lectured at the University of the West Indies in the economics department for several years. Dr. Attzs is now one of the more, or how should I say, well-established persons that we have speaking on our budget annually. If you can find her on every panel discussing the economics of Trinidad and Tobago. Dr. Attzs holds currently more of an administrative role with the University of the West Indies, where she more focuses on the economics of sustainable development. She's instrumental in the development of many of our economic programs at the University of the West Indies. And in that capacity, we saw it fit to have Dr. Attzs moderate for us tonight. So Dr. Attzs, I hand over to you for us to have that conversation with our members for this evening's program.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you for that introduction. And good evening to my U.W.I Credit Union family and to everyone else who is viewing our little chat this evening. As Natasha said, my name is Marlene Attzs, and it is my pleasure to host this session on behalf of the U.W.I Credit Union family. But it's not all about me. I want to start by introducing some of the other persons who will be joining us this evening around our living room table. You know, I like to talk about the living room concept. So it's family. We're talking about things that affect us as family. So I'd like to start by introducing those who we have in studio. And, you know, it sounds fancy to talk about in studio. So here at our credit union headquarters, we have 2 other panelists with me, and then we're also going to be joining a 3rd panelist, and then another guest speaker. We're going to be joining them virtually. But allow me to introduce Ruqayyah Scott, who is one of our panelists. She joined us last year in our budget conversation. She's an undergraduate student at U.W.I St. Augustine, pursuing a BSc in economics with a minor in environmental economics. Ruqayyah is passionate about leadership, economics, politics, and diplomacy, and she has been working with many civil society and governmental organizations and youth-led entities that allow her to exercise her passion. So I want you to join me in welcoming Ruqayyah as part of our panel. Then we have, moving swiftly along, so it's a full U.W.I family we're getting this evening. So Ruqayyah is from the Faculty of Social Sciences, Department of Economics. Then we have Omardath Maharaj, who is no stranger. Anybody who knows anything about agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago would have heard about Omardath. He is an assistant lecturer in the Faculty of Food and Agriculture. He's passionate about agriculture, but he's most focused on improving the cohesiveness and socioeconomic circumstances of rural and vulnerable interests and he specifically works with farmers and fisherfolk organizations throughout Trinidad and Tobago. So help me welcome Omardath to our living room this evening. And the 3rd person I want to introduce at this time is none other than social commentator, Ms. Rhoda Bharath. She's an educator at the University of the West Indies, and she's also a digital communication strategist. So these are my 3 immediate family members who are going to be chatting with me now. Hi, Rhoda.
Hi.
Going to be chatting with us. So we have a surprise guest. Well, not quite a surprise. We advertised him. Mr. Sunil Maharaj, who is the Vice President of the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago. He's going to be joining us for a chat in a little while, because a lot was said in Budget 2022 that people have focused on in terms of the impact of what was said in the budget on food prices. So Sunil is going to join us for a conversation to shed some light, because I felt it was particularly important for us to have clarity in terms of what was said in the budget and how it is going to impact on what you put in your grocery cart when you go to the grocery. Well, if you haven't gone already, how it's going to impact on your grocery cart in the coming weeks. So a pretty interesting and dynamic panel that we have this evening. But I want to start by asking Rhoda your thoughts. The budget was read on, it's the longest budget ever, almost a kind of Fidel Castro moment, almost 4 hours we talking.
It was the longest budget ever.
It was the longest budget, both in terms of the print, but also the longest in terms of the delivery. And I remember, of course, I was preparing to go on one of the evening programs, and I was kind of like, Jesus Christ, stop talking now, because I need to get ready to go in tongue, you know, and I want to make sure what you're missing. So budget 2022.
Is this where I get to say that possibly our shortest Minister of Finance has delivered the longest budget speech ever?
And moving swiftly along, we know we could expect more of that coming from you. But just to put some context of budget 22, we come out at a time where we had COVID-19 challenges. A lot has been said about the government's expenditure. We had a budget deficit. We've had budget deficits since, as far as I can remember, certainly from 2015, we've been experiencing budget deficits in Trinidad and Tobago, meaning our government has been spending more than they have been earning. So we're going into that space. Our budget deficit moved from 5.6% last year to 11% because of COVID-related expenditures. We have all this high debt to GDP because we're borrowing money. Questions around that sustainability or unsustainability, as the case might be. So we're starting with Rhoda. Rhoda, what were your thoughts about the budget? What hit you, apart from the fact that the shortest Minister of Finance gave the longest? But anyway, moving swiftly along, what were your thoughts, initial reactions to the budget?
Initially, in listening to the budget, because I had the opportunity to read it several times in the subsequent days, but listening to it, and I listened to the entire thing, I felt that it was the first budget that I'd heard in a few years. I would say certainly since Imbert has been Minister of Finance, that truly focused on attempting to stimulate entrepreneurship within the economy. Mm-hmm. Because in listening to a number of the initiatives, especially the financing initiatives and the SME initiatives, I felt, okay, yes, given what is going on right now in terms of the pandemic, in terms of what it means for employment, in terms of what it means for security overall, making a push towards funding entrepreneurship or encouraging entrepreneurship or making entrepreneurship a little bit more accessible, that could lead to some stimulation. I also liked that there were avenues for investment. Mm-hmm. I felt that sustainable energy, green energy, clean energy, we still need to have a proper conversation about what really and truly we're attempting to do with energy. And I think there's a lot going on in agriculture. I would have liked to hear a bit more about agro-processing. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to hear more about agro-processing because we see what's going on with food prices, and I'm not talking about food prices locally.
Yes.
I am talking about food prices elsewhere.
Yeah,
I'm talking about shipping, world freight issues, and also the ability for these other countries to be able to supply the markets that they're shipping food to. Mm-hmm. So given what is happening with food production globally, I would have liked to hear a little bit more about what we're planning to do with respect to agro-processing here, so that there are options and alternatives on the shelves for consumers, because not everybody going to make jam in their house from raw products.
That's correct, yes.
Right? Not everybody is going to make dips and dressings.
Or homemade wine or all of those kinds of things, precisely.
Not everybody's going to do that for a number of reasons. People don't necessarily have the skill set or the time anymore
to that.
What their work-life balance is. So for me, I felt that given the energy constraints that we've had from 2015 to now, and given the pandemic that would have touched down here in March of 2020,
Yeah.
I felt that it was a budget that was looking towards
It was decent. It was a decent sort of path that was being attempted for us to navigate. We're going to come back to talk about some of those things, because while I hear you, I think that we didn't go sufficiently, and I know some of those details will come out in the budget debate and when the line ministers get to speaking. So interesting things that you touched on, and precisely some of the issues you raised in terms of the global prices that will impact on us. We've invited the Supermarkets Association to talk about, and of course Omardath is going to try to balance that in terms of a conversation around agriculture, agro-processing, and the opportunities that he sees, given that he is essentially in the trenches in that sector. But I want to ask Ruqayyah to kind of weigh now on what were your initial thoughts. As a young economist, lot was said in the budget for youth. To my mind, very little. In fact, nothing was said about the education sector per se, except for the allocation. What are your initial thoughts, just to kind of get us started in terms of, what you took away from that budget presentation?
Well, good afternoon, first of all, everyone, and thank you for having me. Right off the bat, when I listened to the entire budget presentation, I listened to it in its entirety, and it was very long. And even though it was very long, it missed key things. While I can appreciate that it was, the intention was really to build resilience and keep Trinidad and Tobago stable, which I think is important, because we know how important stability is in an economy. And I really appreciated all of the financial resources for SMEs, not just in, what we're accustomed to in terms of businesses, what we see, retail and so forth, but really technology and agriculture. So I was really happy to see that. But something, as a young person, I'm always concerned about my future in terms of climate change, in terms of the fourth industrial revolution right now, in terms of the labor market. So I would have loved to see some more being said in terms of education and how are we preparing our young people for this new job market. How are we reaching the young people that are at risk? And when I say at risk, I'm talking about, those who may come from criminal families or drug addiction or domestic violence and so forth. How are we reaching those young people? And of course, the big question is implementation, because there were a couple of things that I heard in this budget that was mentioned before. And I understand nothing is going to get done in 1 year, but TT Wi-Fi, for example, is not something that can take 15 years to happen. If we're talking about digitization.
Particularly, we're talking about digitization.
We want that to be a swift process, and we want to be able to include everybody in it. And I think that was where we kind of missed the focus. And I was looking forward to that in the budget debate, but then the Minister of Youth and National Service didn't even present. So so for us, young people, were kind of like, okay, cool. That was said. We saw the allocation. There was a talk about education, but now we really don't know. And I don't think you can just arbitrarily say we're going to set up youth camps. What is going to happen in those youth camps? Who are going to come? And are you reaching the youth at risk with those youth camps?
If I could not just speak on behalf of the Minister of my NDS, I think, as
my DNS.
My DNS, sorry, yeah. I was at a forum with him on Thursday, and he, of course, spoke very eloquently about all of these youth camps, and I raised with him whether or not there was an opportunity for there to be alignment between his ministry and the Ministry of Education.
Exactly.
So that if there are youth at risk, the Ministry of Education has an eye on these persons, or they know that there are opportunities to have these persons absorbed into the youth camps and all of these things. And the minister, to his credit, he said that there was a national youth policy, which I was not aware of. I think it had been passed in January of 2021.
Yes, it was.
And he did say that there was very close alignment between his ministry and the Ministry of Education in terms of identifying these youth at risk, so that the programs at the various youth camps, so there was going to be a revamping of the MyLAT and the MyPart, and he spoke about these things. I don't know what circumstances prevented him from participating in the debate, but he spoke very eloquently. So some of the things that you raised, he did say they would be addressed in terms of their plan. But we're going to come back to talk about the education for resilience, as I call it, in a little while. Omardath, the man of the moment. We're still heavily dependent. So one of the things that I find interesting is that, notwithstanding a conversation around diversification, notwithstanding the fact that we recognize that our vulnerability is so, we are so heavily vulnerable to the energy sector, conversations around agriculture, we still not having the kinds of conversations. Rhoda spoke about agro-processing, etc. Your initial thoughts on Budget 2022 and what did it say for agriculture, or what do you think is happening in terms of the agriculture sector and the attention that all of us, I think, here think it should be given?
Well, good afternoon again, and thanks for welcoming me to the U.W.I Credit Union family. I think Rhoda really opened the conversation there by coining very nicely from, I'll use her as the example because she's not intimately involved in the sector, but of course she recognizes, as everybody, meaning the layperson, should recognize the vagaries that we are faced when being exposed, of course, as an import-dependent nation, especially in terms of food. Of course, we are dependent on other types of imports, such as clothing, vehicles, and all of that. But each and every person is affected. But looking raw at the statement itself, the budget presentation, of course, every year, people like myself would hope to hear more about agriculture. You know, we hear the normal things about how many kilometers of access roads rehabilitated and these sort of basic statistics. But then the question is, as you rightly asked now, what are we to take away from that? You know, as a university student, for example, looking on and so on. And for me, just by what he said, not, of course, involving all other types of information, is that the focus placed by the government now on agriculture hinges on their roadmap for recovery document. But if you really take up, first of all, I should say that there are several versions of that made its way into the public space. But one of it says that or describes our agriculture sector as being technologically advanced. Now, unfortunately for me, I see those things as, you know, that's more the rhetoric of policy documents in this country. We sort of like to put the vision before dealing with the issues.
Yes, that's
right. So
bizarre.
that's the thing. So of course, yes, I would love to stand up in any platform globally or wherever and say that our agriculture sector is technologically advanced. But we need to sort of embrace the reality of the sector more, you know, in the sense that, of course, we know the perennial issues and so on that continue to plague us. But in 2021, farmers still cannot, some of them still cannot have legal permission, of course, to establish rest areas on farms, to establish a sense of like a homestead and so on,
okay,
right?
All right.
They can establish a toilet, for example. Good thing. A few years ago in Arangwes, for example, there was this viral social media scare about farmers pulling waters from open access drains and ravines and so on. So what I'm saying is this is the state of the sector in 2021. Of course, the sector is well capitalized as well in some parts. I'm not disputing that because the taxpayers of this country has taken the burden to support agriculture. We have the agriculture incentive program, we have VAT and taxes off a lot of the inputs and so on. So, but the point is, let us start by embracing the reality of food production in this sector, right? That's one. The other thing is, I've also said that the sector continues to suffer from a history of underinvestment and failed policy. That's a statement I continually put out in the public domain for discussion. So it doesn't stick to...
And you're saying that Budget 2022 maintained that in terms of the lack of vision.
It maintains that. The minister did, of course, he's the salesman for fiscal policy of the government, and he used different sales pitch, of course, which I commend. But I'm just saying that if you look at the historical trend, so now that when we want to rely on local food production, the sector is not what we expect it to be. We haven't been preparing this bride for this moment all these years.
Yes.
So that but we need, of course, one simple proposal I've also put out in the public domain is that I would like to see a sort of overarching national policy framework for sustainable agriculture and rural development. Just as Ruqayyah mentioned, the youth policy that came in and so on. Now, that's sort of national. It's not to say a sort of like a PNM agriculture plan or UNC. It's not a matter of that. It's a matter of where we as people of this country, where do we, you know what I mean, anchor ourselves.
So it really speaks to a vision, and I want to come back to Rhoda in that context. Now, one of the things Rhoda said, and I'll get back to you in a little bit on that in terms of the agriculture and some other things that you touched on. Rhoda said that she was happy to see some efforts to stimulate entrepreneurship, etc. So do you think that there is a sufficient vision? Omardath was talking about a national policy framework for agriculture, but did you think that Budget 22 provided a visionary framework that says these are the things that are important? You identified green energy, etc. And of course, one of the things that struck me, the electric cars coming in, but of course, do we have the architecture and the infrastructure to support the importation of those electric vehicles? But more generally, do you think that there was a vision that could be articulated in Budget 2022? Did you get that sense?
Well, two things. The minister reading the budget statement is not the entire budget.
No, it is
right?
the headline. It's really the
Right.
headline.
Right, it's the headline, and he would have read the 3.5, almost 4 hour long statement. And then the debate, which was carded to end Thursday coming here, ended prematurely because the opposition on Saturday evening did not put forward persons to debate. And so because they didn't put forward persons to debate, the debate couldn't proceed because you can't
it was
have somebody
aborted,
from
yes.
the government coming right after.
Well, you can't have a debate with one set of people. So
Right, you can't have a debate with one set of persons. So then the Minister of Finance would have done a 10 to 15 minute wrap up, and in it he laid out his 18 points. So what is going on now is the Standing Finance Committee. And I think the Standing Finance Committee is useful because, of course, that's where you go through expenditure, point by point, line item, line item, line item. And I think it is going to give us the opportunity to see where and how they're planning to do things. Now, the ministry that is meant to be guiding policy with respect to small and medium enterprises is the Ministry of Labor and Small and Medium
Yes.
Enterprises. And we really haven't heard a lot from MP McClatchy, Minister McClatchy, in the last year. And I'm not interested so much in hearing government policy about small and medium enterprises. I am far more interested in hearing NEDCO and whichever entities they would have put the funding through. I'm far more interested in seeing how they go about marketing the facilities that they now have available to them, so that young persons such as Ruqayyah, for instance, or any other young person
can access it.
And let me, be bold enough to pull myself into that group because 40 something, early 40s.
No.
Yeah.
You're pulling yourself into the group of young persons. The UN definition ends at 35, Rhoda.
Well, who's the UN? The UN.
Even the minister says that their definition ends at 35, Rhoda.
And the minister don't get to define Rhoda. So I am sorry.
No, but on the point of SMEs.
But but here's what I want to say. Let me finish the point. I want to say, as somebody who is a new entrepreneur, right? So let me put it that way. If you want to be a new entrepreneur and you are a young person who wants to be an entrepreneur, I think it is useful for the various government entities or state entities that are functioning as incubators for entrepreneurs to now step up to the plate. I'm not expecting the Ministry of Finance to be stepping up to the plate here.
To take care of that.
Right.
But my question to you on that is, do you think that there is sufficient clarity in terms of the ecosystem and the architecture in place? So I hear you on the funding.
There isn't.
And to me, there has to be a distinction between different kinds of SMEs. This is something that I have argued. So it's you coming into the system. It's agro-processing person who graduated from UWI 10 years ago to me there is not. So my issue is, notwithstanding the funding that is being put into it, and I know the Minister of Finance, either when he was doing the media review or something, made mention that the grant that was provided for SMEs back last year was barely touched because of some basic things, because some of those SMEs didn't have audited accounts, etc., etc. So I'm saying that, but there needs to be this architecture, which is my point, that has to be built around it.
Right. So we're making the same point. There needs to be the architecture, one. There needs to be proper marketing of the architecture so that people know, hey, if I want to be able to set up a business plan, get my financials put in order,
right, yes.
figure out how to go about approaching these entities with a business plan to be able to be successful, right? That infrastructure needs to be readily apparent, readily available.
And properly articulated.
Yes, much better articulated. So it's all well and good to say you have 30 million or 50 million or whatever is the sum in grant funding available. But I also need to know, if I'm going to access these are the steps and stages, these are the entities and organizations to go to, and these are the areas that can be covered if I want to be able to access the money for an idea that I have.
Excellent. Absolutely agree with you. And I think, inside of this, one of the things that we do apart from talking about the budget, we also talk about opportunities for our credit union to find a space inside of the budget. So to my U.W.I Credit Union family, I think that there might be an opportunity here for the conversation. But taking off from Rhoda's point, Omardath, and coming back to you, the whole question about the agriculture sector, the vision, SMEs and agriculture, food prices, how do we navigate that space? Do you think that there is an opportunity here for us to kind of catapult or to pay greater attention to SMEs that can be involved in agriculture, if only to help with things like local production, food and nutrition security, food prices?
Well, we have a few things working in our favor. The COVID-19 pandemic actually brought a new wave of interest in agriculture. Of course, it created a greater forum for people like myself to advocate why we should focus on some level of sustainability, even at the household level. And I think, of course, getting involved in agriculture, or even from a government perspective of encouraging that, is actually one of the largest social safety nets that they too could probably even encourage or afford, right? One of the connecting points I just wanted to jump back on the budget was that while the minister did mention the removal of VAT and added on whatever it was, what I wanted to hear also, which I spoke about some time ago, is that I would have liked him to simultaneously present proposals, whether it could be legislative or what, to really balance that conversation in society, which speaks to reporting or even punishment for things like unnecessary profiting and price gouging. Because yes, of course, you have the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Explain just for our audience, so everybody's clear on the price gouging part.
Well, of course, I can identify a particular...
No. You ain't calling nobody names, no whistleblower.
But just making an example. Just to make an example. For example, I live in Chase Village, right? And one of these village shops, the parlors near to me, the guy there sells egg like every other, but it's $3.50 for one egg. And I didn't know. I went to buy my newspaper a few weeks ago, about two or 3 weeks ago.
That special kind of egg.
The golden egg, but at $3.50. So, but the thing is, I accustomed to buy by the dozen. And he refuses to sell that, but of course, the price of that.
Yeah, right.
And so he told me, like, go somewhere else and buy it. So, but in my community, there's, of course, has been a rise in the number of tenanted apartments and so on around there. And he caters for people who probably, their income affords them the lifestyle or whatever it be, the budget on a day-to-day basis.
Sure.
So you wouldn't buy a dozen or a crate. You're doing that, but think about the hardship you're inflicting on people who operate in that sphere.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
You could get 12 eggs for $20 in a
Precisely.
Of course, that's the point I'm making.
I buy a half crate for $25, yes.
But the deal with this, Paula, here, I'm just saying that while we talk about food price and we want a balanced society, and there was, of course, this specific reference to the Supermarket Association, of course, helping guide the process and so on. We want to be, put more resources. Either it was the Prices Council or sort of rejuvenate Consumer Affairs Division and empower these.
Right, which we used to have long time, and I'm glad you raised that point, Omardath, because this was a headline that came out on Wednesday morning, where the Minister of Finance said that, prices are out of the government's hands. Yeah. So, long time I know it used to have a price control board where you could have gone report these things. So, you're $3.50 for one egg, which will which will scare me for forever. You could deal with those kinds of issues, but this provides a perfect segue for me to introduce Mr. Sunil Maharajh, who is the Chief Executive Officer of True Value Supermarkets. He's been the Chief Executive Officer since 2018, and he's also from the U.W.I system, and he is, most importantly on this occasion, he's the Vice President of the Supermarkets Association of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, this evening, as we're preparing for this session, when I came in, the technicians asked me if I wanted a song. Apparently, I have a reputation for wanting a song. So what came to mind was Lord Relator's food prices. So let me hear a little bit about that. Let me hear.
A friend of mine come and tell me about 2 months ago to bring back the old time calypso. He said, well, Relator people keep asking everywhere to bring back an old time reminder. I said it's a good idea, without a doubt, but what the France they want me to sing about is then he declare, sing about the price of food and
how things so dear. Thank you, DJ, thank you. So, perfect segue for Mr. Maharajh. Mr. Maharajh, you're on the line with us. Welcome,
Yeah.
welcome to the U.W.I Credit
Thank
Union.
you.
Welcome to our living room session, our conversations around Budget 2022, and thanks again for taking the time to chat with us. So one of the highlights, lowlights, confusing lights about Budget 2022 is the minister's announcement about items that will now join the zero-rated basic food items, and there was a subsequent notice coming out of the Ministry of Finance that extended that list to include things like olive oil, for example. So I wanted to ask you just to explain to our vast audience and to our credit union members, because this is going to be playing in the lobby of the credit union for months to come, what really has happened and how are prices, when we go to the supermarket, how are prices determined? What are some of the factors? So we heard things about the shipping costs, the shortage of foreign exchange, etc., etc., etc. Just to share with us some of the considerations that go into pricing items, and just to clarify, provide a little clarity in terms of what items are now, not the exhaustive list, but some of the items that are now on the zero-rated list and how they can impact on us as consumers.
All right, well, let me start by saying that we've had some significant food inflation, particularly this year. Unfortunately, this is one of the secondary side effects, if you want to call it, of the COVID-19 pandemic. So what has happened, unfortunately, is we've had two major crises. The first is the issue of shipping, which has been fairly well ventilated in the press. A lot of the problems originate in the Far East, particularly at the Chinese ports, where most of the raw materials come from, and quite a few of the finished products come from. But there's also a fair amount of problems on this side of the world, in the U.S. ports, particularly the West Coast ports, at California, and to some extent even in Miami. So whereas in the past, ships would come in and be on their way in a day or so, now it's taking a lot longer. So apart from the fact that you have less ships moving around the ocean, you now have a huge problem with just the port operations, just not up to 100% yet. So that is causing some problems. It's a straight supply and demand issue. So container prices have gone from $3,000 or $4,000, and we're hearing by December it will be in the range of $18,000 to $20,000. That's US dollars, and that's just the shipping cost. So to bring a container out of the Far East, particularly from China. So those are the numbers we are dealing with now.
So Sunil, if I am to understand what you're sharing with us, zero-rated or no zero-rated, we're going to face higher prices at the supermarket, and not just for the pigtail and the corned beef and the other things that are identified on that list, but we are likely to face higher prices, food inflation across the board for everything that we consume, because much of what we use, even for things that are produced locally, the inputs, the raw materials are imported. So what you're choreographing there for us is that we're going to have higher prices for practically everything: cigarette, rum, basic food, everything.
And this goes outside of food as well, because if you wanted to buy a bed, for example, remember the raw materials, a lot of the raw materials are still have to be imported, and they will still have to be shipped in from wherever. So all of those variables that we just talked about will apply. So we're looking at this as a universal, across the board, all products, you're going to see a very steady increase in prices, purely from just shipping costs.
And all of the challenges that are attendant in the supply chain, so the shipping costs, the availability of the foreign exchange or lack thereof for us in Trinidad and Tobago, all of these things are going to impact. So what is the Supermarket Association? Just tell us a little bit about how that is then, what then happens. So is it that we can see prices varying from month to month? I mean, what is the prognosis? Not to lock you in or in any way to lock in the Supermarket Association, but just to give us as consumers, many of whom are on our salaries are not increasing. What does that mean for us in the coming months, particularly at a time like Christmas where a lot of what people consume, so you want to bring in your currants and your thing for your black cake and the rum to soak the fruits and all those things. What is it that our members can look forward to?
Well, I'll just give you a little idea. So you are going to see prices increasing. You are going to see product availability is going to become challenging. And you're seeing that in the UK, you're seeing it in parts of the US now. And it's not just food. Factories and so on, not up to full speed yet. There's still a lot of COVID around in the world. So you're going to see that. Now, when you put all of that in, you're looking at supply and demand issues. So when you consider Trinidad and Tobago, a population under 1.5 million, bidding against countries, let's think, bidding against companies operating, let's say, in Toronto, Canada, or
Kingdom
in Lagos,
coming out of
Nigeria.
Europe, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anywhere, and they are serving 10 million people, 5 million people, 20 million people. You start to understand how far down we start to move on the order priority. So you factor that in now with a chronic foreign exchange crunch, which has been going on for the greater part of 4 years, 5 years, and it's not improving, and it's not forecast to improve. While you start to understand that we are still doing very well in spite of, but it is likely that you're going to see your favorite brand or size of whatever it is. You may come to the stores and it may not be there. It may be there and it may not be there. There's no guarantee that it will. So that's what we're going to see.
But with supermarkets, for example, so I know the conversation around corned beef. Would supermarkets then contemplate bringing in the lower end of the lower priced items as opposed to the vast array? So if you go in the supermarket now, you probably see about 6 or 7 kinds of corned beef with varying prices. So is it that there might be consideration, or you will keep those higher priced items? Because what you've explained suggests, if I can simplify it, that notwithstanding the transition of these items to zero rated, and I'm sticking with the corned beef just for ease of reference, notwithstanding that moving across to the zero rated items, you could still find yourselves in a situation where the price has increased. As a couple months ago, there was a listing out that suggested some of these items had increased by 75%, 100%, more than 100%. You can still find yourself in that realm paying 100% more for a particular item simply because of all of these other variables that are putting pressure on the price.
Correct. Yeah.
And then we add to that, not to be a doomsday person, but we add to that the fact that there is likely to be an uptick in fuel prices, which has the Minister of Finance happy. So if you add that scenario to what you're discussing here, it means that things are going to look a little grey for us in terms of food prices.
That's correct. So it's going to be price. There's going to be pressure on price, and there's going to be pressure on supply and availability.
Okay.
So that's what we're dealing with. My belief is that we're going to see this going through at least until maybe mid-year next year, maybe second quarter. And hopefully, if all things being equal, we start to see the pandemic subsiding or retreating, if you want to call it that, you may see the world starting to get back to normal as we are seeing now. Then maybe things may start to improve. But I think cater for at least maybe 6 to 9 months of this, and hopefully after that it should. I'm guessing it.
And after that, we're going to get some ease in prices from the Supermarket Association.
Well, the supermarkets don't really manufacture anything.
I was being cheeky. So once the pressures that impact on your container prices, for example, once those pressures are eased, we can expect to see some relief being passed on to the consumers.
Absolutely. And in spite of all of that, you will see we are an association of members. We are all friends in the association, but the knife come out once you leave. It's a cutthroat business. There is no friendship in this. It's war. And I'll say for all of us, we absolutely love the competition. And you will see most of the members and even the non-members being very creative in how they package their offerings to the consumers. And you will see it from True Value as we go along as well. Because we do understand that, as you said, the majority of people are salaried, and those of us who are lucky to be employed, because many of us are not employed
That's
anymore,
correct.
or not employed 100%.
Absolutely.
We may be at 50%.
Absolutely.
So we are all very much aware of that, and you will see the supermarket owners and operators becoming more creative in trying to keep things as affordable as we can.
And as you mentioned the war, we just hope that the consumers will not be collateral damage in that process.
Well, without customers, we have no business. Huh? So it is in our interest to keep our customers happy and to make things as affordable as we can. So you will see us squeezing margins and doing deals and trying to move products. Supermarkets don't really operate on very big margins. We like to move products through the stores. So it is in our interest. I think everybody prefers to move 10 at a slightly lower margin than just one.
Yes,
because in the end, when we compare the GP dollars that we make from it, that keeps the lights on and keeps salaries paid. So and that's what you're going to see.
All right. Sunil, thank you very much for joining us. I think everyone would appreciate the clarity that you provided, and also the kind of warning that the months ahead are going to be a little bit interesting. And I think there are implications for how the credit union kind of engages with some of its members, but also how we as citizens of Trinidad and Tobago navigate the space ahead of us, particularly as it relates to rising prices. So this is no longer a figment of our imagination. It is clear. We've heard it almost from the horse's mouth. I mean, not being disparaging. The Vice President of the Supermarkets Association sharing with us what is likely to be the situation for us in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of food prices, particularly those things that we import. So not just food, but all of those items that we import into Trinidad and Tobago. So from your bed, as Sunil correctly said, to your tin of sardine, to the milk, to everything that we consume. And as Ruqayyah would know, as a good student of economics, we produce things that we don't consume, and we consume things that we don't produce. So thanks again, Sunil, for shedding that light on us, and we hope to chat with you again in the future.
Absolutely. Call me anytime.
Have a good evening. Have a good evening.
Good night, guys.
Good night. Thanks much. So, with that said, Omardath, how do we use this opportunity, use these challenges, use what is lying ahead of us to kind of make a very determined clear path forward for the agriculture sector, not just agriculture in terms of fresh produce, but for agro-processing, to see a burgeoning. Rhoda spoke earlier about SMEs, the opportunities there are. How do we capitalize on this? Because the writing is on the wall.
Right, well, we finally reached the destination. Naysayers like myself talk about all these years. A sort of worst case scenario, but still in crisis, there's opportunity. So for example, in the last year, I've been able to spin what I consider to be a very successful entrepreneurship model called the yard market. And I actually created this entrepreneurship hub, including things like agro-processors, primary. We basically do everything for home gardening or household food production. And I've been able to, of course, bring on board 8 to 10 entrepreneurs with me. Several of them have gotten national media attention. We had like one girl, for example, one lady. She's an employee of the central bank who turned into herb garden. Herb gardening, sorry. And so she produces all these bundles of different types of mints and so on, even now that people drinking the little bush tea and thing and so on, to supplement the vaccination, right? She's gone and started a business in that. But I also wanted to say that based on what Mr. Maharajh said, the consuming population, everybody in this country, we are now moving to a higher price plateau. And notwithstanding what happens in transport and logistics and so on, we would anticipate, in the best of circumstances, prices to fall back to a level suitable to our incomes and, of course, what we are accustomed to. But as students of economics, we know that prices are upward sticky and downward rigid. And it means that given the income profile of this population, we have to be careful that we don't push people into being working class poor. That's one thing we want to manage. The other thing I just want to quickly tie into that is, in terms of the agro-processing. There's significant that happens there, when people talk about agro-processing, we feel it's tamarind ball and red mango we talking, and it's sort of petty example. That's a big business. Right, the government of the day spent $90 million in half the forest in Moruga to put in this facility. They've spoken about it and so on. Unfortunately, as Rhoda spoke about the NEDCO and marketing what is available, I think we have to do a bit more on that. We always talk about farmers who get robbed out and all of that. That's very important, yes. But not everybody wants to go in a hot sun. Not everybody had 2 acres of land sit down now in bush that we could run to and so on. We have a large, as I said, a tenanted population as well. The demographics in this country is very fluid. We have a migrant
community as well.
Community dealt with and so on. These people don't have access to all these things, but of course on a daily basis they need to eat food. So we want to be able to not only incorporate how everybody could participate, but it means that we have to have inclusive agriculture. That's where the conversation is going on. So when we talk about the budget, my final point before I move on is that, of course, the budget is not an agriculture budget. The minister didn't stand up there to sing what I want to hear, But any national plan going forward, whether it is a budget or if we speak to it separately, we should have a clear focus on feeding our people. Where or what is the source of that food? We should be having clear conversations about securing lives and livelihoods. And I noticed the Minister of Health used that language. I think the Prime Minister, I heard him say, but clearly, how are we doing it?
Yeah.
And the last thing on that is, in that same conversation, we must have mature social dialogue.
Yeah.
It shouldn't always be a war of words.
A cuss out.
And that's what agriculture is known for. If you look at tourism stakeholders, people in finance and so on, they have clear objectives, what they want to achieve, and they lobby and advocate. The agriculture sector itself, the stakeholders are so scattered, and different lobby groups and this and that and so on. I think it becomes, over the years, of course, we don't have consultation, collaboration, and of course coordination to show in times like now when we are supposed to be growing from the ashes, so to speak. You're still looking like you're
You still have the disparate group. So. Ruqayyah, I'm going to come back to you in a little while to talk about youth in agriculture. Your minor is in environmental economics, and I wanted to get you to weigh in on this, but I just want to go to Rhoda for a second. Rhoda, what Mr. Maharajh is telling us is that as consumers, we're going to have to make my takeaway is that we have to make different kinds of choices. So how do we get citizen John and Jane to understand? So I was hearing from a friend of mine who has an 8-year-old child. I live vicariously through these persons, that some particular snap that the child eats has moved from $1.50 to $3. One biscuit, something. Now, in my days, I know you make cookies and thing, and your mother makes sponge cake on a weekend. How do we get consumers to understand what is happening? Because we have persons who have lost their jobs. We have persons for whom the income that they earn now has to be used differently. The prioritization is different because children are at home, so you have to make sure that the internet bill is paid because they have to go to school. How do we engage consumers in these kinds of conversations? I mean, I was a little disheartened to see the minister say that price is out of our hands, so ergo, all fall down. How do we get people to understand the new space in which we're operating, or, not new, but the different space that we must navigate because the prices are not going to go down anytime soon?
Well, okay. How do you start a national conversation? You start a national conversation usually using media, right? You can also start it by using your education channels. But right now, education is blended. You have some people out in schools, you have some people studying virtually. To use national media to get a particular conversation going now, I think is actually quite difficult because we're all not listening to the same things. I grew up in a time when there was one television station, a handful of radio stations, and the persons that would be in charge of leading conversations in those areas, everybody would be listening to the same conversations, right? So this evening, we are having this particular conversation here, and it would be up to us to have our audience thinking about things in a particular way, talking about things in a particular way. There are ways in which, I guess, with respect to what Omardath is talking about, let's use NAMDEVCO as a for example. NAMDEVCO would have to be part of leading some sort of initiative, public education initiative, public education conversation about the products coming from farmers, the kinds of things that can be done with, let's say, a market basket, right? So as a very quick, for example, a public education program that shows persons within homes, when you go to NAMDEVCO with $200, this is what you could buy for $200, and these are how many meals you could provide for yourself for a week or 2 weeks, however long, right?
Sure.
But these are how many meals you can make with $200 worth of products from a NAMDEVCO basket. That's one thing to do. Another option, and I'm one of those persons that I'm always unwilling to talk about just the Ministry of Finance, because we talk about consumer prices and that falls under trade and industry.
That's correct.
Right? So the Ministry of Trade and Industry, for instance, can point to the list of items that would have been released, because the minister spoke about a handful of items in the budget, and then a couple days later
there was a longer list. Yeah, there was a longer list.
A much longer list, right? With that longer list, the same concept. These are the various meals that you can make with all of the food items that are currently VAT-free, right? Because the things that are on that list for budget 2022, there are other things that can be added to that list, because the zero-rated list is actually longer than what would have been released on the Thursday. So there are ways in which I think what needs to happen, they need to package the initiatives, package the ideas. The way Omardath can talk about the yard market system that he has, he could easily show me a list of items that's on sale at his backyard market system and say, this can happen, that can happen, these are the options with the things that you have available. And when you start packaging people's options in that way and placing the options before them in a tangible, digestible way, then we could start to have the conversation about what our food bill looking like.
Yes.
Right? The domestic food bill.
That's right.
The import food bill. Yeah. What we can eat, what we can do with the
what
money.
What happens at the household level? How do you how do you deal with the fact that children are at home, so they're eating more? How do you deal with that as a different dynamic, as it will? I just wanted to read out, as you mentioned, the longer list. I just wanted to read out some of the things, the headlines. Separate and apart, in addition to what the minister would have mentioned last Monday. So there's olive oil being added to the list, coconut oil, black pepper, cereals, including what they call kids cereals. I don't know if that's different from cornflakes, Fruit Loops, I don't know what that is, but oats, condensed milk, steel cut oats, seasoned meat is now being added to zero rated, roti skins, packaged soups, table butter, ham slices, etc., etc. So all of these things are being added.
Ghee.
And ghee. Ghee, of course, being added. I don't want to forget ghee, because I just use ghee. So when I saw ghee on the list, you were quite happy.
I was very happy, because ghee is not cheap.
And I know ghee, and particularly for our Hindu community coming up to Diwali, it is going to be a significant part of their celebrations. I know they'll be happy to see that. So the list is a lot more expansive than what we had seen before, but I think you're absolutely right. And I remember back in the day, Ministry of Consumer Affairs used to put out these things about cooking, getting meals out, healthy meals, etc. So maybe we need to go back to those days where there was a greater collaboration, but there was also an opportunity for CSOs and NGOs to get involved in this conversation. So I just want to shift gears a little bit to Ruqayyah to ask her, what is your take on youth involvement in agriculture and some of these conversations? Are you as a young person and as an advocate and working with some of these NGOs and CSOs, are you seeing these kinds of conversations taking place around among young people in terms of things like food prices? Are those things that you find interesting, or once you could go into KFC or the nearest fast food joint and buy something that you're all right? I mean, are these conversations that you think your cohorts are concerned about?
Well, there are definitely conversations that, my colleagues and I are having, because just today I went to the grocery. I started back the gym today as it opened 11th, right? And I'm trying to be healthier. So when I looked at this, this list, I was a bit disheartened to see that majority, not all, because the olive oil, of course, that is, more on the healthier side. Oats, of course, is on the healthier side. But I was a bit disappointed to see other items that are on the unhealthy side. And as you mentioned, back in the day, of course, now I would have been, a thought, maybe a thought, yes. Right? With these coordinated programs on healthy eating, healthy cooking, and that sort of thing, that is what I would like to see. And of course, among young people, when we're talking about agriculture, what I hear is that people are looking at it in terms of an opportunity for employment and sustained income. And for me, while I understand that's also very important, I sometimes wish that we can capture the essence of agriculture, which is really food, to sustain us. And I'm not a very big fan of always looking at something for profits and for money and that sort of thing. Let's understand how important agriculture is to our sustenance, And when we can understand that, then you may have a different work attitude. You may have a different approach to it. And then you can get more people involved once you understand. And back in 2017, I did an agricultural project with some other young people, and we went to some secondary schools and we dealt with Form 1 children. And a lot of them, when we came in, they started laughing, and everyone got like a free package of seeds, and they got instructions to go home and put this and whatever. And everyone was laughing at the beginning. But then after, when we took them through understanding, we're not talking about money, understanding what this is going to do for you, we could immediately see how these children were impacted. And I think that's what we need more from our education system and so forth. Because the reality of this situation is, as Omardath said, let's accept the reality. People don't want to get into agriculture. Now because of COVID, they do, because it can bring income.
But why do you think people don't want to get into agriculture?
Because of the stigma that has always been on agriculture. And I mean, we have to, and everything is not about the government. Yeah. Families, your mother and father telling you, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, don't go in the sun, that's not for you. I remember it had a point in time, I will say I wanted to get into agriculture. And I remember so many people told me, no, that's not a woman's job. That why you're a lady, why you want to go in the hot sun? And I was like, no, I don't have to go in the hot sun.
Let me just add one point.
The agricultural industry has so much more.
There's a good time for you to jump in terms of educating people on agriculture.
And women in agriculture is also such a thriving sector as well.
Yes, it is.
They do a lot, including balancing budgets.
Yeah.
But let me just add to that. It had two sides to the conversation. One is I want to make three quick examples.
Course, yes,
one is, we talk about the rising imports and the raw material. But a nice example I like to bring across is ketchup. Ketchup is a fairly standard thing, But actually, when that tomato paste comes from wherever, it lands at the Port of Port of Spain, it goes to Diamond Vale Industrial Estate. But let us think about when it lands here, we create employment at customs level for trucking and transportation.
People on the port, etc.
Exactly.
Yes.
So it goes into Diamond Vale Industrial Estate, and you have a whole manufacturing facility there that converts this. You have factory workers, food scientists, people in agricultural marketing, packaging, all these things. And then people take down a truck, which is further transport and distribution. And you could go down on a parlor, some in the Guayari, and buy a pack of ketchup for $80. But that value chain created a lot of employment along the way. So I always try to be careful about, people want to say, well, eat local, whatever, and you're gung-ho with this thing. Which is, of course, I support that, But we have to be also mindful that in our island state, it also provides employment.
And
there's
our
a
heavy
positive
dependence on what happens in the rest of the world also has.
The repercussions now of a higher raw material price, one of the panelists made that point. We had to also look at how that's going to impact all the other sectors.
The value chain.
And that shows the interrelations between this sector and everybody. Of course, everybody eats. When you talk about the youth, for example, and so on, I was making the point just now that there's a new wave of interest in this sector. And unfortunately, I was very critical of the roadmap to recovery. I felt that the government could have done more in terms of the consultation that go into it. Because I see that as what I described as this overarching framework going forward. But in that, actually, it describes agriculture as being high risk and low reward. That's the language used to describe. But if that's the position we take and we put that to people,
and
nobody
I think it didn't give sufficient attention to the role of technology in agriculture.
So now that we want to ventilate this thing, and you're saying that the roadmap is the guide, we still could challenge that in terms of how it incentivizes. So yes, we could put money, we could say this and that, whatever. But I think that if we don't set that tone for this sector, it continues to be this noise that we hear all the time, buzzing.
If I can jump in.
Yes, Rhoda.
And I want to jump in from two perspectives. I want to jump in as somebody who is in a market. I go to a market every weekend, and somebody who is involved in education. The majority of my vendors at the market that I go to in Diego Martin are younger than I am. So the persons that I'm getting sweet potatoes, greens, eggs, and any number of other products from, they're younger than I am. And I think too, if we are going to go the way of talking about making agriculture more attractive to young people, I taught in the senior comprehensive system, and then they shifted from senior comprehensive to making all of these schools into 5-year and 7-year schools. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with making schools have a continuous education program. But the technical vocational programs
was lost when they did the transition.
Yes, they suffered incredibly. And agriculture, the agriculture subject was one of the areas that allowed youngsters to see how they could provide food for themselves and how they could earn a living from providing food for themselves.
And I mean, it's interesting, just Rhoda, that you made that point, because while they took out all of the TechVoc programs, the things like the mechanical and the electrical and stuff went into MIC, but there was no space for agriculture. Agriculture didn't transition into anything else. So MIC got all of those other kinds of training programs, but agriculture just fell by the wayside.
Yeah, it fell by the wayside. So I think that part of what has to happen, because I see a wave of young interest in agriculture. And just in the last, I would say 4 to 5 years, I've seen a wave of interest in young people. And I'm going based on my shopping experience. Right. But I feel to be able to continue to have that wave going and rolling, reintroducing an agriculture program in secondary schools and TechVoc programs. I was very disappointed when technical vocational programs were removed from the secondary education system.
You see what happened to us. We had plenty of oil money in those days, so we were very myopic in terms of our vision. We now realize that TechVoc is really the backbone. When you talk about these electric cars and this whole new wave of who is going to look after those vehicles if you don't have people trained in those kinds of areas? So to me, there is a need for us to connect some
digital transformation. If we're doing digital transformation,
it has to be driven. It has to be driven by. This is coming back to Ruqayyah's point now about the skill set and the human capital that is required. And do you think it's sufficient was said? We haven't heard from the Minister of Education, or have we?
We did.
But did she say anything that gave you?
And that's the thing, the conversation about education in this country really, and I'm not talking about the conversation in terms of the public, I'm talking at the government level, has always been seen, it's the same thing. All right. No 400 scholarships, just 100. It's the same thing. You know, we're just talking about numbers, but nothing's really changing. Because at the end of the day, we have to prepare for a new world. There's no going back to normal, you know. Sorry to break it to everybody.
I call it the COVID
but there's
adjusted
new normal. It's the COVID adjusted normal.
Because that's the only normal it have.
Yeah, it's going to be very, very new. And when I hear the Minister of Finance talk about financial technology, I'm like, but we can't even get it right in agriculture, but you're talking about financial technology. So the same thing, the skill sets. I mean, I went to a government secondary school, and I did agricultural science at Form 5, and it didn't have much people in class, and there was nothing at the Form 6 level, you know? So what Rhoda said is correct. The TechVoc, where is that? And we need to see more of that. And we need to see the curriculum change, because you cannot expect us to just turn 25 and then all of a sudden you are a tech expert and you are a cryptocurrency
or
expert.
You click your heels three times and we have a digital transformation and all of these things.
It's not going to happen like that.
Which is
and then we also need to have our young people not be segregated from the rest of the population. I think we as young people need to understand that we play a very big responsibility. So what I learned, take it home. You understand? Teach your parents and the people around you, because it does not make sense for just the young people alone to have all these digital skills and everybody that, because we are not the majority in this country.
No, yes.
Right? So, you know, we are not the majority in this country, and there in itself lies an issue where we have to find a way to integrate everybody in this process, because it makes no sense if I could apply online for something and my father can't do it.
The other day I was renewing my US visa online, and at the end of, I must admit it was a long form. At the end of it, there was a question asking, did anyone help you complete this form? And I kind of like, and then it occurred to me that it spoke volumes, because I asked
people advertise that
myself
service,
the extent to which the average Trinbagonian youth who has benefited from 5-7 years of secondary school education, hopefully 5, but we know in COVID that probably is not 5, Lord help us. When those persons have to complete forms like that, I suppose that is why these businesses mushroom around the country. So you have visa help kiosks,
and consultancy, and charge somebody $1,500 to fill out a form.
But I want us to we need to start to wrap up our session. But in terms of opportunities for credit unions, starting with our credit union, Ruqayyah, since you were on the floor, I wanted to ask you: do you think that there are opportunities for our credit union to provide training programs, for example, for young persons to get them on board to fill some of those gaps? Now, we recognize, and I keep saying that the government in its current, with its current challenges in terms of revenue, can't be all things to all persons. So we have to get the private sector on board. And for all intents and purposes, I want to see credit unions as part of that private sector. Do you think there's an opportunity that credit unions can become more actively involved, can get more young persons involved in the credit union, and how can we engage them? How can we woo young people to be more actively involved in?
Well, I think the first step is partnering with youth organizations, and I know U.W.I Credit Union had attempted that with the Guild of Students to do some financial literacy training with U.W.I students, and I think that is so important, because I didn't know anything about managing my finances. I just used to spend wild, I'll be honest, and I think a lot of us young people do that.
Yes, I think that's
do that, right? Obviously because we're excited that we get a little money and so forth. But as you get older and becoming an adult, stepping out of your teens into early adulthood, you learn that there are certain things that you have to do: save, invest, buy a car, buy a house eventually. And I think
I like your order though. I want to go for the house first and then the car afterwards. So we're talking about buying a home. So for me, I'm 21. If I want to buy a home, I can't even get a credit card. So what I'm talking about, the process to get one. Young people have to build credit in order to get some mortgage. And look at the price of housing. I know we didn't touch on that, but look at the price of housing. It's ridiculously high. But some incentives were in place for...
Yes, of course. First-time homeowners, no stamp duty up to $2 million, which is excellent, because stamp duty can be a lot.
And because many houses now are close to $2 million. So,
yes, and you look at the $2 million house, and there's a box with 3 bedrooms in it, and you don't even have a space in the backyard to put a little pool, half a pool if you want to. So there's a lot of issues that we have to deal with in this country. But what I will say is that...
I was thinking, say no space to put a little backyard garden, but anyway, all right, okay.
Right, but my point is really, I think credit unions play a great role, especially since through my experiences with financial advisors, they usually advise young people to save with a credit union instead of a bank. So I think therein lies an opportunity for credit unions to get that info. Come and save with us, come and invest with us, come and borrow with us, and so forth. And I think that will really change the conversation, because young people were attentive and we will listen, because we don't want to be, a lot of us don't come from generational wealth, and we don't want to necessarily live the same lives as our parents and grandparents, and we kind of want to change that. So I will listen. I would love for the credit union to reach out to me, and it doesn't have to be me personally, but through a club.
Target younger person, target younger
exactly.
membership.
So target us and
and kind of mentor them, mentor young persons.
Mentorship. I think
Yes.
mentorship is extremely important. More than giving somebody a paycheck, sometimes mentorship is really important because it's more about building a relationship and transferring those skills. And I think that's important, and I think that's what young people need. But I also want to encourage, for any young person listening out there, you also need to seek out the opportunity as
Yes,
well.
absolutely.
There are opportunities out here, and I remember just last week someone had made, I think it was Kareem Marcel, a very well-known youth activist as well. He had made the point that there are certain programs in place. You have to go and look for it. Go on the ministry's website and search and apply and whatnot, because yes, we want the ministries to reach out to us more, and it's my hope that they will. But we also have to take it upon ourselves to just go and tap in and to show some initiative. And I mean, I see it in UWI every day. I mean, let's not get into that, but I notice it in school. Sometimes the department will post internship opportunities, job opportunities, and then some students will complain that they never see
anything. Because I think many of our young
anything.
people now, they're into the microwave and fasting. So if it's not in front of them, they're not interested.
And
they're not
that
going to seek
speaks
it
of
out.
cultural issue that we have of being spoon-fed all the
Yes.
time. We have to take some initiative. I mean, this is our country. So I might be, well, I want to be a future economist, but we're speaking with future teachers, future crypto, whatever you call it, creators or whatnot.
Future
right?
digital,
But future
Zaz,
everything.
you know, as the case might be.
Exactly. So we are eventually going to make up, the technocrats in society.
So Ruqayyah's point about credit unions partnering with youth to kind of take us
Yes.
forward. Omardath, do you think, given the conversations we've had around agriculture, for example, that which we've traditionally seen as a kind of risky business, you said in the roadmap to recovery it was high risk, low return, that there are opportunities in this new space for credit unions to look at providing support for agriculture-based SMEs, and I'm saying agriculture-based to include agro-processing. And I was mentioning to you before we started, that I've now seen a new set of locally produced microgreens and bhaji coming out of a place in Arima, a nice broadleaf bhaji that I quite like. So,
Oi,
you know,
bhaji.
do you think that there are opportunities for credit unions to seek out those kinds of businesses, those kind of SMEs to provide support for them?
Yeah, well, in responding, I could link it to, in 2018, I had the opportunity to explore issues in agriculture, especially financing inclusive agriculture and rural development in India. And there I had the opportunity. Of course, India is a big place, 1.3 billion people on average. And actually, it was a state-run bank, which is NABARD, the National Agricultural Bank for Rural Development and Agriculture. They invited me, and the training that they provide, the exposure to all of their policy and program efforts and so on, was conducted through an organization called BIRD, the Bankers Institute for Rural Development. So I say all of that to mean that there is a wider world experience in terms of how we could go about financing the sector appropriately. But certainly 1.5 million people, we all hope to eat 3 meals a day. On an average of $10, that's like $45 million a day minimum. If you try to put a value to this market. For the year, that's about 16 billion or something. Of course, you could now go to a restaurant for a $200 meal and something. I'm just talking about $2 at $5, right? But in terms of the credit union and its membership, of course, if your clientele or your focus are people who are not only looking to create new income streams, but of course to supplement those that they already have. They see agriculture, yeah, we all agree that it is not this sort of drudgery. We're not describing that necessarily, but you have people who are using different hydroponics, aquaponics, the Faculty of Food and Agriculture has a nice display right across in St. Augustine here of different production techniques. Soon enough, the University Field Station will be open. You can see different models there. And of course, all of us are generally available. But the point is, the market is there in terms of potential, but for the credit union's perspective is, one, you want to invest also in your membership. If they see this as an economic activity that could possibly bring further business to the credit union, you want to be able to support them. The lending requirements, of course, have to consider the challenges of the
Yes,
sector,
of course,
understand
yes.
the risk, whether it's weather, theft, whatever. But you could also help to mitigate that in terms of helping develop the sector through upskilling. For example, one of the requirements for an agri-based loan, as you describe it, is proof of participating in some professional training program.
Yes.
You know, so many are offered by the government, Ministry of Agriculture. They have these consistent extension training programs and all kind of things, whether it's budding and grafting or production techniques into making juices, sauces, condiments. All these things are always running We are all online now. I'm sure there's a video somewhere. Of course, I wouldn't lead a certificate watching a video.
Yes, but yes, the information is available.
And UWI Faculty of Food and Agriculture, right there, we
I was just about to
continuously
say
run
that.
training programs and so on. So.
Since you're on a roll there, Omardath, we have a question from our viewing audience. Should more emphasis be placed on value-added products in agriculture?
Of course, that hinges to Rhoda's opening remarks about agro-processing.
Correct.
And I was just trying to show the vastness of agro-processing, not to mean red mango and tamarind ball, but to show that experience of ketchup.
But tell people why, just repeat that point, why it's not tamarind and mango have a good market outside of school. All of us kind of benefited from that. Right. Chili bibi, all of these kinds of things. I said chili bibi there, Rhoda. I wonder how much people know what I'm talking about, girl. You know, but that has its...
I understand why Omardath fighting down red mango.
And I don't understand. And tamarind ball. But just to reiterate the point, why you want to go higher up the value chain.
We need to go higher up. The higher we could carry basic primary food up the value chain is that we create more economic wealth locally. Yes. Right?
Yes.
Employment,
everything that it carries, economic activity, livelihoods, even Ruqayyah made the point about generational wealth. There are businesses here. We talk about family farming, for example. You could create a source that you can hand down to your children and they carry that forward. The same way
I wonder if people understand that is how this thing started, pepper sauce. This popular pepper sauce now.
Bertie's pepper sauce?
Bertie's.
Yeah.
People understand that is how Bertie's started.
But even like we look at Angostura bitters as this distant thing. Look at something like that. So nothing prevents us from all now participating in the sector. And we spoke about, I know you're winding up, so I just want to say that as being people in education, you know, we speak here from a university perspective, all of us. And public education awareness is very important. So yes, we want to wait and the government should do and see and all of that. But the point is, all of us have individual platforms. Rhoda, for example, has people who would listen to her, who she could educate and so on. You, in your own networks, Ruqayyah in her student clubs, her private networks and so on. And I think it's a time where we should all focus on shifting the national conversation. You know, towards, let's call it asset-based development. This is what we have. Let's focus on how we could carry ourselves forward and not waiting for somebody else to tell us, run in our direction, eat VAT-free, cut back on salt, whatever.
And there is a role inside of all of that for our credit union to essentially be change agents as well. So starting with their membership, starting with this conversation that the credit union holds on an annual basis, but every time somebody comes in, one of the things that UWI Credit Union was very good in terms of pivoting when the lockdown came, when there have been different changes. I remember when there was a change in the GATE program, the credit union quickly put out, our gates are open to you, and, very cleverly kind of pivoting to engage its memberships. And I think what I understand Omardath to be saying is that here again is an opportunity. Let us not wait on the government, because that could be a little long in coming given their own challenges. Rhoda, what opportunities, following from the question to Omardath and Ruqayyah's contribution, how do you see the credit union being able to kind of engage and clear a path to help its members go forward? Because the baseline of UWI Credit Union is, of course, UWI employees. We have not yet been scarred by what is happening in terms of COVID-19 and salaries, but UWI has extended its membership beyond, the credit union has extended its membership beyond the U.W.I, but there's a reality facing us in Trinidad and Tobago in terms of how we move forward. What role do you see for credit unions, and particularly ours? What space can they find? What niche is there for them to help themselves, but also help their members navigate this space, you think?
Let me start with an anecdote. I think most folks are aware that I have a social media platform.
I think more or less, I think people might be aware of it. Yes,
might be. I don't take it for granted, because I think there's an age group that I would appeal to, and then there's an age group that I would not appeal to. There are multiple demographics that I may not necessarily appeal to. In any case, the person that would have helped me or taught me how to go about using all of the technology that I use now to be able to run the platform, he got into where he got into based on a credit union account. His mother started a credit union account for him. And every time she had a $20 or whatever it is she had, she'd put it into the account. He was not aware of the account, but over time, the money accrued. And when he was in his late teens, early 20s, and wanted to get into a particular industry, film and videography, there was this money that he was able to use to buy his first set of equipment, right? I have a credit union account. It is an account that money goes into because there's a standing order. I don't check the account. I went recently, I checked the account, and when I checked the account and they told me how much I had in the account and what I could actually borrow from the account based on what was there. If I want to, I could go and take out a small business loan if it becomes necessary. The credit union, I think, is poised at this point in time, especially with the support that it can get from the Ministry of Finance, to be able to function as a micro entrepreneurial incubator.
That's correct.
Right? It can function as an incubator. It can identify areas where there is need for certain kinds of businesses, whether it is within a community, whether it is within a sector, but it can begin to identify, okay, this community needs this, that community needs that. Let's see where we have our members located. Let's see if we have members that are interested in getting into entrepreneurial activity in this way. And let's see how we can A, train them, and B, fund them and get and function as an incubator.
And I will agree with that 100%, because every time you mention NEDCO, and it's not a pejorative statement, but I think NEDCO does not quite have the same kind of vision and drive as you will find in a credit union that is not a government agency. Remember, the credit union is going to go into this
public sector versus private
precisely.
sector.
You know it, yeah, I think so. So I think I would want to support you in that, in terms of an opportunity that exists for the credit union to actually become its own incubator. So you glean from the public sector, from the public space, what resources might be available to you, and you do your own risk analysis, you do your own cost benefit analysis to see how you can navigate this space and set up some kind of small business, micro. I also like to include in that conversation micro, because not everything is small. Some is just two people going into a business. Some is just Omardath's central bank lady who has gone into herbs and those. So that is just one person. That is not small. That is a micro. In fact, that is a nano enterprise. That's a one person, so to speak. But on that score, we have a question coming in. Should we, the staff and members of the credit union, start our own food basket? And of course, my response is absolutely. But with that food basket, one of the ideas that Rhoda put forward is tell your members, because you have members across the spectrum, the ones who are daily paid, the ones who are fortnightly, the ones who are monthly paid, what can you do with this? Because I know your situation, I know you have children at home. These are some of the things. And the credit union, I don't know if you still do it, but the credit union used to have like cooking classes. Now is the time to revitalize that, put them online, let people see what they can do with a basket. So the example Rhoda made earlier on about this is your food baskets, this is what you can do for a week, for a day, etc. Particularly since you have children at home, I think now is the time for the credit union to start having those conversations, more conversations. I know the credit union has been very good, as I said, in terms of engaging its membership. I think now is an opportunity for there to be those ongoing conversations to fill that need, so to speak. So I know it's time is getting close and time for us to wrap up, so I want to start giving the final words. So Rhoda, since you're on the floor, the final words, and then we will come to Omardath and then to Ruqayyah.
I want people to think about what they have. I guess I want people to think about the next year, the way they would think about their household budget, right? What do I have? What do I need? What can I invest? What can I invest what I have in? There are opportunities there, and I feel the more we take advantage of the opportunities, and not just the opportunities provided by the state, there are lots of other opportunities for reinventing, retooling, re-educating yourself to be able to do new things, other things. I also think that just giving yourself the opportunity, the space to think alternatively, to think otherwise from time to time, to look at the various options you have. So you walk into the supermarket, as a for example, and you see, I don't know, whatever it is you are accustomed to purchasing that is extremely expensive, there are alternatives that are less expensive. There are options.
There are options. And on that point, I have a friend who we were having this conversation on the weekend, and he was, he had me in stitches. He said he went to buy soap. He said he watched the Dove and he passed the Dove straight and he went and buy Liberty. I said, where's Liberty? He said, a soap. I said, how does it work? He said, I will find out. But he said the difference between Liberty and Dove was $5. So he said he made a decision, and I think that is one of the points going forward for our members. How do you make different choices given what is in front of you? Omardath, your final words.
Two final words. One is that UWI itself, and of course the credit union following suit, already has a sort of leadership role in terms of how we sort of shape the reality. Because in 2019, just before this whole pandemic thing unfolded at Christmas, we celebrated our annual Eat Local Day. That's something I started in 2012 with farmers in celebration of our anniversary of independence. In 2019, it was adopted by the Faculty of Food and Agriculture, and we had it at the University Field Station, where more than 300 students were brought to the farms through their 4-H clubs. And they not only saw, well, of course, food production, but they were exposed to a range of 100% local meals and so on, which is what we try to achieve on that day. And every year on that occasion, I usually make the call for us to designate a National Eat Local Day. And of course, the vision behind that was that in these circumstances, people would feel empowered. We wouldn't feel anyhow to eat or suck what we call a tanka bean compared to a high-grade chocolate, or, you know what I mean? We should be getting a connection. And, through these activities like the yard market and other fora, those are the messages I always try to inculcate, that there are so many other alternatives. So, but going forward now, we're in this situation and we want to, of course, stay above water. And we heard all this talk about food prices, people probably feeling a bit heavy this evening and so on, okay? And, we could further compound that if we discuss the reality, because even traditional food exporting countries, look at, you have a potential US-China trade war and all of that happening. But when this happens, if food exporting countries sort of, internal policy dictates that they build food reserves or redirect a more profitable market and so on, it exposes not only us in Trinidad and Tobago, but at least 18 million people in the region.
Yeah, but we saw it when we started COVID-19, there was all of the vacillation around whether or not our food supply and supply chains would be cut off. Yes.
So, but, I only discussing the food, you could connect this to everything else. But nothing prevents us now, where we have the fiscal space or the personal leeway, some of us, thankfully, to, as Rhoda described, sort of readjusting to this, what we call a new reality. We don't know what it is, will be at the final shout. And that also exploring household food production. So yes, we could talk about business and so on, but I like to encourage this household conversation, because even my children right now growing carrot and strawberry. And, I share them all over social media anywhere I get a chance. So the point is, your children could do that too. That's not rocket science. You could talk to me free on social media, and I tell you how to do it.
Here's an idea, UWI Credit Union. We can tap into Maharajh's expertise and we could start a backyard garden competition among members.
A backyard jam.
All of that too, backyard jam, a virtual. So you show your produce. All right.
So that's the tie of that. There's so much that we could all start to do. We don't need to wait on a lead, or we don't need to wait on a trigger.
But sometimes you just need a nudge. Sometimes people just need a nudge. You just need to hear that it can happen. I try to grow herbs. And I don't know, something about me and herbs just not, whatever. That's a different conversation. Ruqayyah, you have the final word.
Well, I do have a strawberry plant, by the way, and every day it's going well. So I'm hoping to, get my strawberries very soon, because when I go to the grocery and I see $75 for a tub of strawberries, I cannot on a student budget. So I'm really hoping that my strawberries, grow fruit really soon. But for me, what I would like to say is, I think as a population, we need to understand what is the role of the state, and then what is the role of us as private individuals. Yes, there are certain things that the state will be responsible for, and I think education is one. I'm a big advocate for holistic education. So for me, going forward, what I want to see is more reform within our education sector. And I know this It's not something us as private individuals can necessarily do, because if everybody were to start a private school, we may have problems with costs and people may not be able to afford. So this is why the state is so important, because we have access to pre-primary and secondary education. Definitely, I look forward to that. And in terms of us as private individuals, as Rhoda said, let's look and see what can we do with what we have and how can we use our platforms. Omardath said that his chat is open for free. I will definitely message him to get more information on how I can make my strawberry plant grow faster. But that's the thing. We all have, our platforms, and we all have ideas as well. Let's tap into the opportunities for SMEs. For example, if you have a business idea, tap into it. You never know, you might get lucky and maybe a beneficiary of the loan and you can start something. There are a lot of opportunities that I heard the finance minister mention for technology startups as well. I know a lot of young people are into tech.
Yeah.
So, there are opportunities, but I would really like for us as a society to come out of the culture that is so highly dependent on the state for every single thing.
Yeah. But I think that dependency
it's not practical.
That dependency goes both ways. The government has encouraged that for many decades.
Yes.
And we, the people, have become very comfortable just waiting for daddy to hand us something. And now daddy's saying, well, I don't have the money to give you what you need to.
For my last thing, that I would love the U.W.I Credit Union to have that backyard garden thing. And also have Farm and Happy come in and do a little jingle. I think that would work well.
All right. Okay, on that note, I want to thank my 3 panelists, Rhoda Bharath, who joined us on Zoom, Ruqayyah Scott, our youth activist, a student of the Department of Economics, the Faculty of Social Sciences. Of course, Omardath Maharajh from the Faculty of Food and Agriculture, well known. And of course, Mr. Sunil Maharaj, who joined us from the Supermarkets Association and provided some clarity for us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have done my part. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being such a wonderful audience. And I now hand over the floor to my namesake, Marlene, the other Marlene.
Pleasant evening, colleagues. They say the best form of the highest form of praise, Thanksgiving, praise is Thanksgiving. And this evening, it will be remiss of me not to say what from our hearts on behalf of U.W.I Credit Union and the Education Committee, to thank our moderator who has been with us through thick and thin, and she has assembled such an efficient and well-qualified panel who has brought the essence of the strengths and the weaknesses of the budgeters. And what she's done is open it up that we can now digest it, because it's 4 hours of talk and we really need to see the wood from the trees. And I think they've brought it home to us, and we thank Marlene again, we thank Dr. Attzs, we thank Rhoda. She gave me a makeup tutorial while I was waiting, and I had to go and try some things. And I want to thank Ruqayyah. I hope I get her pronunciation well, for creativity and that zeal she has. I thank Omardath, his points on agriculture head on and so direct. I want to thank Ms. Sunil, is it?
Sunil Maharajh, yes. Yeah, Mr. Maharajh.
Maharajh and Mr. Supermarkets Association for making time to zoom in on us, because that is where we all go and spend the money and we get frightened. As we enter the door, we begin to sweat, and we saying, but what we spent $500 last month and we carrying home 3 bags less. So that we know, for even when we're not even counting, we know that prices are zooming on us, and we bring the insight. I want to this evening also thank the board, the management and staff of U.W.I Credit Union for this yeoman task within this season, because they've kept us together in this season of COVID. They've worked hard and they've kept the U.W.I family strong. And I want to thank them. I want to thank the U.W.I family members for taking time off from the busy schedule to sit and sup with us and participate in this roundtable discussion. I want to thank also the technical team who was at it quite early and did a yeoman job to make sure I look right and at the right angle, to get my good side. They told me how to put face, my body, and so on. And I want to thank them. And I want to say that for the credit union, lessons to be learned. There's a task, as Marlene said, as change agents. And we really have to go back to the brass tacks. We have to take a different kind of risk in this season when so many people don't want to take risks, and we have to go out there and invest and believe in our membership, continue to believe in our membership as we widen the bond and we go forward.
we need to bring in a new kind of members and to work with the youth, because that is where the strength of the credit union will lie. I think that you have given us a lot of food for thought, and I've made notes. I would send, all of us have made notes, things to be had. I think one of the things we're about to do is a skills bank, which allow our credit union members with skills to register with us, and we create an incubator where they can do jobs for the membership. And where there's not training, we would eventually give them training on how do you treat a customer, how to engage, how to price your job, and so on. So that there's a bigger role for entrepreneurship. And that is going to be the strength, I think, of the growth of the credit union. If we can get people who can go out there and employ people and know what it is to work and generate income on a different level, not have to wait for the jobs that are not there. So we thank you. I think this has been an insightful, one of the best ones we've had, because we've had to think and we've had to see how we could draw the meat out for this budget. And I thank you. We really thank you this evening. To each one of you, and anybody I've left out, it's not because I left you, or it's because it's oversight. But we thank you, and we really, really enjoyed the session. Thank you again. God be with you all.
Thank you, Marlene.